Jacob Kendrick's death shook a small town to its core. His sister Lauren showed up to say goodbye, but vanished without a trace. What danger followed her from the funeral? This is the chilling story of obsession, secrets, and a darkness hiding in plain sight. It was a chilly morning in early October when Lauren Kendrick found herself stepping off the bus in Marlow Creek, a small town she had left behind years ago. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, and a cold wind swept through the empty streets, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of damp leaves and distant wood smoke. Lauren pulled her coat tighter around her and looked around. Nothing seemed to have changed. The same cracked sidewalks, the same faded storefronts, the same silent houses with curtains drawn tight. But everything felt different now, because she wasn't here for a visit or a reunion. She was here for a funeral. Her younger brother, Jacob Kendrick, had died just 1 week earlier in a tragic car accident. Lauren had heard the news through a phone call from her mother, her voice breaking, her words hurried and confused. Jacob, only 17, full of life and promise, was gone. The news hit Lauren like a thunderbolt. She hadn't been close to him lately. The distance between them stretched not only by miles but by time and silence. Now she wished she had done more, said more. But all she could do was come back. The town felt cold and unwelcoming, as if it was mourning alongside her, but holding its grief in tight, silent fists. Lauren checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and cracked tiles in the bathroom. She barely slept that night. Her mind raced with memories of Jacob, his laugh, his stubbornness, the way he used to challenge her to races down the hill behind their old house. The past and present collided inside her, bringing tears she could not stop. The morning of the funeral dawned bleak and gray. Lauren dressed carefully, choosing a simple black dress and a single white rose to lay on Jacob's coffin. She looked into the cracked mirror in the motel room and barely recognized herself. The woman staring back was exhausted, haunted, and barely holding together. At the funeral home, the small crowd gathered quietly. Neighbors, old friends, teachers, and family all came to pay their respects. Lauren moved through the room slowly, nodding to people she barely recognized. Everyone seemed wrapped in their own sorrow, speaking in hushed tones or not at all. The air was thick with grief, a suffocating sadness that pressed down on her chest. Jacob's coffin lay at the front, polished and simple. The white rose Lauren placed on it seemed fragile against the dark wood. As the service began, Lauren's mind drifted back to the last time she saw Jacob. It had been a year ago at Christmas, a brief visit filled with awkward smiles and half-conversations. She wished she had taken more time with him, told him she loved him more clearly. Now it was too late. The service was short. The pastor spoke softly about life and loss, about the pain of saying goodbye. Lauren stared at the coffin, struggling to keep her tears in check. Around her, others wept quietly. The room filled with the sounds of muffled sobs and whispered prayers. After the service ended, people slowly filed out. Lauren hugged her parents, feeling their broken hearts through their trembling arms. She said goodbye to neighbors and acquaintances, her voice tight and forced. Everyone told her to take care, to not hesitate to ask for help. But she only nodded, wanting nothing more than to be alone. She walked out of the funeral home toward her car, parked just outside. The sky had darkened and the first drops of rain began to fall. Lauren paused for a moment, looking back at the place where her brother had been laid to rest. The weight of the day crushed her, and she felt the first real wave of grief wash over her. For a moment, she considered staying with her parents, but the thought of their brokenness was too much to bear. Lauren started the engine and pulled away from the funeral home. She told herself she would drive back to the motel, rest for the night, and leave early the next morning. The road was slick with rain, and the headlights cast long shadows through the trees lining the highway. She played soft music to calm her nerves, but her mind remained restless. As she drove, flashes of memories surfaced. Jacob's messy room, the sound of his laughter echoing through the house, his stubborn refusal to wear a jacket in the cold. She thought about their childhood fights, their shared secrets, and the quiet moments they had once cherished. All of it felt so distant now, like a dream slipping through her fingers. When she arrived at the motel, Lauren pulled into the parking lot under the flickering neon sign. The night was dark and cold, the wind howling softly around the building. She checked in with the clerk and took the key to a small room at the back. It was bare and smelled faintly of mildew, but it was a refuge, a place where she could collapse without pretending. She unpacked just a few things, setting her purse and coat on the chair. Sitting on the bed, Lauren stared out the window at the empty parking lot. The silence pressed in on her, thick and overwhelming. She reached for her phone and scrolled through pictures, ones she had taken years ago with Jacob, ones she hadn't looked at in a long time. Her fingers trembled as she traced the edges of his face on the screen. Lauren's mind raced with unanswered questions. How had Jacob's accident really happened? Was it just a tragic mistake? Or was there something more? She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that she hadn't yet uncovered the whole story. The thought both terrified and compelled her. As the night deepened, Lauren's exhaustion finally caught up. She lay back on the bed, the white rose resting on the nightstand beside her. Tears came again, silent and slow, soaking into the pillow beneath her head. She thought about the funeral, the faces she had seen, the unspoken grief in the room. She thought about Jacob, her little brother, who should have had his whole life ahead of him, and she thought about the drive home she was supposed to make tomorrow. A drive that would never happen, because something waited in the shadows of that. Small town, something no one expected, and Lauren Kendrick was about to be pulled into a mystery darker than anyone could imagine. The journey she had started with a broken heart was about to take a terrifying turn, and the town of Marlow Creek would never be the same again. When Lauren Kendrick didn't return to her motel room after the funeral, a quiet worry began to ripple through the small town of Marlow Creek. Her car was still parked in the funeral home's lot the next morning, keys left in the ignition, and purse sitting on the passenger seat. The motel staff reported that her room had not been touched, and the bed remained neatly made as if she had never come back that night. Lauren had simply vanished. Her parents grew frantic. They called the local police, who immediately began a search. The officers combed the streets near the funeral home, checked nearby gas stations and restaurants, and spoke to anyone who might have seen Lauren after the service. But no one had. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. Volunteers from the community joined the effort. They spread out into the woods and fields surrounding Marlow Creek, calling her name and shining flashlights into the thick brush. Dogs were brought in to sniff for her scent. The urgency grew with each passing hour, but there was no sign of Lauren. No footprints, no abandoned belongings, no clues. The investigation quickly became the biggest in the town's recent history. Lauren was known by many as the girl who had left and never quite returned, but now she was part of the community's collective worry. What had happened to her? Was she hurt, lost, or worse? The unanswered questions gnawed at everyone. Then, 2 days after the funeral, a jogger discovered Lauren's phone. It was partially buried beneath a pile of dead leaves on a narrow, barely visible trail deep in the woods. The screen was cracked and dirty, but still flickering faintly, with light. The jogger carefully picked it up and brought it to the police. The officers examined the device immediately. The last photo on Lauren's phone was taken around 4:12 p.m., just a few hours after the funeral had ended. The picture was blurry, showing a tangle of trees and underbrush, but in the distance, something caught their attention. An outline of an old wooden structure, almost hidden by vines and shadows. This discovery shifted the entire investigation. Police focused their search around the area seen in the photo. They sent teams into the dense forest, pushing through thick bushes and navigating uneven terrain. It was hard work. The woods were dark and silent, filled with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant birdsong. After several hours, they found it, a small cabin, falling apart and swallowed by nature. Its wooden planks were rotted and weather-beaten, the windows smashed, and the roof sagging under years of neglect. The cabin looked like it had been abandoned for decades, but it was the last known place connected to Lauren. Inside, the air was stale and heavy with dust. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. Torn blankets and a rusted metal box sat in one corner. Police carefully opened the box and found photographs, dozens of them, of Lauren's brother Jacob Kendrick. The pictures were taken without his knowledge, capturing moments from school, the park, and near the family home. It was clear someone had been watching him for a long time. The dates on the photos spanned nearly 2 years. None of the images had been taken by family or friends. Whoever took them was a stranger, someone with a disturbing interest in Jacob. Further inside the cabin, investigators discovered a worn leather journal. The cover was cracked and faded, but inside were pages filled with handwriting, messy, hurried, and sometimes unsettling. The journal belonged to a man named Daniel Mercer, who had lived on the edge of town years before. He was known as a recluse, a man who rarely came into contact with anyone and was rumored to struggle with mental illness. Mercer had disappeared, around 5 years earlier. Some thought he had simply moved away, but the journal suggested otherwise. According to the entries, he had stayed hidden in the woods, living off the land, watching the town from a distance. The journal spoke of his obsession with the Kendrick family, particularly Jacob. The writings grew darker the closer they got to the time of Jacob's death. Mercer wrote about plans to stop the danger before it spreads, hinting at a belief that Jacob was involved in something harmful. It, too, was unclear what Mercer meant or what he thought Jacob had done, but his obsession had become dangerous. This new evidence painted a grim picture. Jacob's death, initially ruled an accident, now seemed suspicious. Investigators reopened the crash case and found a crucial detail. The brake lines on Jacob's car had been deliberately cut. Someone wanted him dead. Questions poured in. Had Mercer acted alone? Was he even still alive? Had someone else continued his plan? And what about Lauren? Had she discovered Mercer's cabin by accident? Had she gone there seeking answers? Or was she drawn in by something more sinister? Lauren's disappearance became more mysterious as the investigation unfolded. Her phone was the last trace of her, but beyond the photo, there was no sign she had been anywhere else. There were no signs of a struggle at the cabin or on the path leading to it. It was as if she had walked in willingly and then vanished. The police intensified their search in the woods and surrounding areas, but each day without new leads made hope harder to hold. The community grew restless, fears rising that Lauren had met a terrible fate. The local news covered the story extensively, sharing pictures and timelines, urging anyone with information to come forward. Social media lit up with theories and prayers for Lauren's safe return. But as the days stretched into a week, it became painfully clear that Lauren was missing, and that something dark had taken hold of this quiet town. Her family, devastated and desperate, clung to hope, but faced the terrifying possibility that Lauren's fate might be tied to her brother's. The funeral that was meant to bring closure had instead opened a door to a chilling mystery. Lauren had come to say goodbye to Jacob, but now no one knew if she would ever say goodbye to anyone again. The discovery of the cabin deep in the woods shifted the entire investigation into Lauren Kendrick's disappearance. The structure was nestled far off the beaten path, hidden beneath thick vines and towering trees. It was clear the cabin had been long abandoned, but the signs of recent activity inside puzzled the investigators. The floor was covered in broken leaves and dirt, but there were footprints and disturbed patches that suggested someone had been there not long ago. Police carefully examined the interior. The wooden walls, once sturdy, were cracked and weathered, letting in shafts of light through the broken windows. A musty, heavy smell hung in the air, a mixture of damp wood, mold, and something harder to identify. On a splintered table near the back wall lay a rusted metal box. The officers looked at each other warily before opening it. Inside were photographs, roughly 20 to 30 of them, carefully stacked but yellowed with age. Each photo was of Jacob Kendrick. They weren't casual snapshots, but pictures taken without his knowledge. One showed Jacob walking home from school, his head down and hands stuffed in his pockets. Another caught him riding his bike near the local park. There was even a photo taken through a window, showing Jacob sitting at his kitchen table. The images spanned over the last 2 years, documenting Jacob's life in unsettling detail. The realization hit hard. Someone had been watching Jacob for a long time, stalking him from a distance. But why? And who? The officers continued searching the cabin and found more unusual items. In one corner was a pile of torn blankets, dirtied and old, possibly used for sleeping. Next to it sat an old lantern, its glass cracked but still intact. On the floor lay a leather-bound journal, worn at the edges but surprisingly preserved. The handwriting inside was frantic and uneven, as if the writer had been rushing or under stress. The name written on the first page was Daniel Mercer. Daniel Mercer was a name familiar to the townspeople, whispered with caution. Years earlier, Mercer had been a reclusive man living in the woods on the outskirts of Marlow Creek. No one saw him much, and rumors spread that he struggled with mental illness. He kept to himself, and when he disappeared 5 years ago, most assumed he had moved away, or perhaps passed on quietly. But the journal told a different story. It revealed that Daniel Mercer never truly left. Instead, he had stayed hidden in the forest, watching the town, and more specifically, the Kendrick family. The entries were a mix of ramblings and clear thoughts. Early notes described watching the town's daily life from afar, a mixture of loneliness and fascination. As the pages progressed, the tone shifted. Daniel's writing became darker, filled with paranoia and obsession. He wrote about Jacob Kendrick almost as if the boy represented something bigger, something dangerous that needed to be stopped. One passage detailed Daniel's belief that Jacob was a threat that must be controlled, though it was unclear why he thought this. The final entries were the most disturbing. Written just days before Jacob's accident, they spoke of a plan to end it before it's too late, suggesting premeditation. The words were chilling, cryptic hints at a dangerous intention, though Daniel never spelled out what exactly he planned to do. The discovery of the cabin and the journal transformed the investigation from a simple missing person case into a tangled web of obsession, stalking, and murder. Police reopened the crash investigation with new eyes. They ordered a thorough examination of Jacob's car and found something the original reports missed. His brake lines had been deliberately cut. This was no accident. Someone wanted Jacob dead. The question now was, who? Daniel Mercer's fingerprints were found on the box and inside the journal. But when police searched for him, they came up empty. There were no recent sightings or clues to his whereabouts. Had he disappeared deeper into the wilderness? Was he alive or dead? Or had someone else picked up his twisted obsession? The mystery deepened when investigators found no evidence linking Lauren Kendrick to the cabin, other than the photo on her phone. She had taken the picture of the cabin from the edge of the woods, but there was no sign she had entered. Yet, if Lauren had been near the cabin, was it possible she had come looking for answers? Had she found something she shouldn't have? The search widened again to include the surrounding woods and hidden trails. Police questioned locals about anyone strange seen around town or near the forest. They reviewed reports of suspicious activity, but found nothing concrete. It was as if the forest itself was swallowing the truth. Lauren's disappearance became a haunting enigma. The cabin stood as a silent witness to the dark obsession that had claimed her brother's life, and perhaps now her own fate. The walls that had sheltered Daniel Mercer for years seemed to hold secrets no one could fully unlock. The town of Marlow Creek grew restless, the air thick with fear and unanswered questions. Families kept their children close. Lights stayed on late into the night. The shadow of the cabin lingered in every whispered conversation. Lauren Kendrick's story was no longer just about loss. It was about the darkness hidden in plain sight, the danger lurking behind quiet woods, and a chilling obsession that had cost 2 young lives. The cabin, forgotten and crumbling, was more than an abandoned building. It was a symbol of a secret that refused to die. And somewhere out there, the ghost of Daniel Mercer, real or imagined, continued to haunt the edges of Marlow Creek, waiting in the shadows. As days turned into weeks, the mystery surrounding Lauren Kendrick's disappearance grew colder yet more tangled. The police had expanded their search beyond the cabin and the woods, combing through every lead, no matter how small or unlikely. But the deeper they dug, the more questions surfaced, and the fewer answers they found. Investigators pored over the evidence collected from the cabin, Jacob's car, and Lauren's phone. The brake lines cut on Jacob's car had been confirmed as the cause of his fatal crash, ruling out any possibility of mechanical failure or reckless driving. It was murder, and the timeline pointed to someone carefully planning it, someone close, enough to know Jacob's routines and habits. But Daniel Mercer remained a ghost. His journal revealed his obsession and sinister intentions, but there was no proof he had actually acted on them. If he was alive, where was he hiding? If he was dead, who had taken over his dark mission? The town of Marlow Creek felt the weight of fear and suspicion creeping into daily life. People looked over their shoulders, whispered behind closed doors, and locked their doors more tightly at night. The local sheriff's department was stretched thin, trying to reassure the public while chasing shadows. Lauren's family was devastated, caught between hope and despair. Her parents organized community searches, handed out flyers, and spoke to the media, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. Yet days without news turned into weeks, and hope faded like the autumn leaves blowing across the streets. One breakthrough came when detectives discovered something unexpected buried beneath the loose floorboards in the cabin, a small, locked metal container. It was old and rusty, but still sealed tight. When police technicians finally pried it open, they found a collection of letters, carefully folded and worn with age. They were addressed to no one in particular, but the handwriting matched Daniel Mercer's journal. The letters were disturbing, filled with ramblings about cleansing the town, protecting the innocent, and ending the darkness. Among the letters were detailed notes about Jacob and Lauren Kendrick, with dates, locations, and ominous warnings. It was clear Mercer had been obsessed not just with Jacob, but also with Lauren, seeing her as either part of the threat or a potential obstacle. The most chilling discovery came at the bottom of the container, a crudely drawn map of the surrounding forest. The map marked several locations, including the cabin, Jacob's home, and a spot deep in the woods labeled only as The End. Police immediately organized a search party to investigate the marked areas. The team made their way into the forest, following the rough trail indicated on the map. The woods were dense and shadowy, with branches scraping against their jackets and leaves crunching underfoot. After hours of searching, they found a shallow grave hidden beneath a thick layer of leaves and soil. Inside was a worn backpack belonging to Lauren, along with a few personal items, her wallet, a pair of glasses, and a notebook filled with scribbled notes and drawings. The notebook revealed Lauren's desperate attempt to understand what had happened to her brother. She had written about strange phone calls, shadowy figures near the family home, and her growing suspicion that Jacob's accident was no accident at all. Lauren's last entry was chilling. She had planned to confront whoever was behind the stalking and the threats, even if it meant going back into the woods alone. The discovery of Lauren's belongings confirmed everyone's worst fear. She had been close to finding the truth, but something had stopped her. The shallow grave was empty, but its existence raised terrifying questions. Had Lauren escaped the grave? Was someone still holding her captive? Or had she vanished into the forest with nowhere to turn? Meanwhile, investigators revisited the people closest to the Kendrick family. Friends, neighbors, teachers, all were interviewed again with a sharper focus. Suspicion fell on a few individuals who had been acting strangely in the days leading up to Jacob's death. One was a former classmate who had been bullied by Jacob, but his alibi checked out. Another was a neighbor with a history of mental health issues and a fascination with the Kendricks, but he denied any involvement. The most unsettling revelation came from a local shop owner who reported seeing a man matching Daniel Mercer's description near town just days before Lauren's disappearance. Witnesses had heard strange noises coming from the woods at night, whispers, footsteps, and sometimes a distant scream. The search for Mercer intensified. Officers combed the forest using thermal cameras and drones, but each sweep came back empty. It was as if he had melted into the shadows. Yet the sense that he, or someone connected to him, was still out there lurking in the woods, never left the community. A sense of paranoia gripped Marlow Creek. People began installing security cameras, setting up neighborhood watches, and sharing tips on self-defense. The local high school held assemblies warning students to be cautious and stay together. The small town that once felt safe was now a place haunted by fear and unanswered questions. As the investigation stalled, a true crime podcaster named Emma Doyle arrived in Marlow Creek, drawn by the chilling story. She had a reputation for digging deep and uncovering hidden truths. Emma spent days interviewing townspeople, reviewing police reports, and retracing Lauren's last steps. Emma's research uncovered a connection no one had noticed before. A series of strange phone calls made to Jacob's phone in the weeks before his death. The calls were brief, often unanswered, but the numbers were traced back to unregistered phones registered to a single location, the woods near the cabin. This revelation confirmed the theory that someone had been stalking Jacob, keeping close tabs on his life. Emma also discovered that Lauren had been making similar calls from her phone in the days before her disappearance, calls to the same unregistered numbers. The overlapping patterns suggested Lauren had been trying to find answers, possibly trying to communicate with whoever had been watching her family. But those calls stopped abruptly 3 days before the funeral. Something had silenced her. The pieces were coming together, but the picture was still incomplete. The mystery of Lauren's disappearance was no longer just about one missing woman. It had become a chilling story of obsession, danger, and secrets. Buried deep in the woods, Lauren Kendrick had come home to say goodbye to her brother. Instead, she was drawn into a darkness that had been lurking beneath the surface of Marlow Creek for years, a darkness that refused to be forgotten. And somewhere in the shadows, the truth waited, tangled in lies and silence, ready to be uncovered. But uncovering it would come at a price, one that no one was yet prepared to pay. The weeks following the discovery of Lauren Kendrick's belongings in the shallow grave marked the most intense phase of the investigation. Police intensified their efforts, determined to bring closure to the grieving family and answer the questions that had haunted the town for so long. But the closer they got, the more dangerous the path seemed to become. The chilling map found in Daniel Mercer's metal container remained a key piece of the puzzle, marked with cryptic symbols and ominous notes. It hinted at locations deeply tied to the mystery, places where dark events had unfolded or might yet unfold. Investigators returned to the woods repeatedly, exploring every corner of the forest the map revealed. They found little concrete evidence beyond the cabin and the grave site. But one location stood out, a small, forgotten well concealed behind thick bushes near the far edge of the forest. The well was covered by a heavy wooden lid, warped by weather and decades of neglect. When police pried it open, the air that escaped was cold and heavy, like it had been trapped for years. A rope ladder descended into the darkness, but its rungs were broken and unstable. The investigators called in experts to assess whether it was safe to enter. What they discovered inside was shocking. At the bottom of the well was a small, cramped chamber, barely big enough for a person to sit. Inside lay a collection of old, tattered clothes, a rusted knife, and a worn photograph of the Kendrick family. The chamber appeared to have been used recently, with fresh dirt scattered around the edges. It was a chilling confirmation that someone had been living or hiding there, deep beneath the forest floor. This discovery brought new urgency. The theory that Daniel Mercer might still be alive, or that someone had taken over his plans, gained traction. Could the reclusive man have been hiding underground all this time? Or was another, equally dangerous figure involved? The investigation broadened, focusing not only on Mercer, but also on other potential suspects connected to the Kendricks or the surrounding area. Detectives examined old criminal records, searching for anyone with a history of stalking, obsession, or violence. They revisited interviews with neighbors and acquaintances, looking for inconsistencies or hidden clues. Among those scrutinized was a man named Peter Harlan, a local who had moved away years ago but maintained an eerie fascination with the Kendricks. Known for his unstable behavior and past confrontations with the family, Harlan became a person of interest. When police tracked him down in a nearby city, he denied any involvement but refused to cooperate fully. His evasive answers and nervous demeanor only raised suspicion. Meanwhile, the town of Marlow Creek was gripped by fear and uncertainty. Parents kept children indoors after dark, and rumors swirled about shadowy figures lurking near the forest edge. Some residents reported strange noises, whispers, footsteps, and distant cries that only added to the growing tension. In the midst of this turmoil, Emma Doyle, the true crime podcaster, continued to dig deeper. Her investigation uncovered a startling connection between Lauren and an anonymous online forum dedicated to unsolved disappearances. Lauren had been active on the site, posting under a pseudonym, seeking help, and sharing her fears about the strange events surrounding her brother's death. The posts revealed Lauren's growing desperation. She wrote about strange calls, unmarked cars following her, and feeling watched even inside her own home. She mentioned the cabin in the woods, describing her discovery of the photographs and journal and her fears about what they meant. Her final post ended with a plea for someone to listen before it was too late. Emma's revelations brought new leads. A group of online followers who had been monitoring Lauren's posts shared information about a person known only as Watcher. This individual had been active in the forum, responding to Lauren's messages with cryptic warnings and veiled threats. Attempts to trace the Watcher's identity led to dead ends, encrypted accounts, VPNs, and burner phones. The digital trail was frustratingly vague, but suggested someone highly skilled at hiding their tracks. Someone who had been monitoring Lauren's online activity and possibly orchestrating the events that led to her disappearance. Back in Marlow Creek, law enforcement received an anonymous tip late one evening. The caller claimed to know the location of Lauren and provided detailed directions to a secluded cabin deep in the woods, different from the one found earlier. A search team assembled quickly, navigating through dense underbrush and rugged terrain. The cabin, they found signs of recent habitation, footprints, fresh food wrappers, and a makeshift bed. But Lauren was nowhere to be found. Instead, investigators uncovered a series of chilling messages carved into the wooden walls, written in hurried, uneven script. "She's watching. They come for us all. End it now." The messages suggested that whoever had been living there was unstable, possibly dangerous. It also implied that Lauren might have been held captive or forced to hide here before escaping or being taken elsewhere. The tension in the town reached a breaking point. People demanded answers, while the police faced increasing pressure to solve a case that had already cost 2 young lives. The fear of an unknown predator hiding nearby cast a long shadow over everyday life. Then came a breakthrough that no one expected. A hunter exploring a remote part of the forest discovered a hidden trapdoor beneath a thick layer of moss and leaves. It led to a small underground bunker, crudely built but secure. Inside, the hunter found evidence of recent occupation, clothes, food, and a worn backpack matching the description of Lauren's. More importantly, there was a journal, one not belonging to Daniel Mercer, but to someone else entirely. The handwriting was different, cleaner, but just as frantic. The entries spoke of a twisted plan to punish the Kendrick family for perceived sins, a mission passed down from Mercer to a follower determined to finish what he started. The journal revealed the identity of the new occupant, Peter Harlan. Harlan had not only been stalking the Kendrick family, but had assumed Mercer's role as a hidden watcher, living in the shadows, orchestrating events to terrify and harm the Kendricks. His obsession had grown darker, fueled by jealousy and delusion. The police now had the evidence they needed to arrest Harlan. A coordinated effort led to his capture just outside the bunker, ending the nightmare that had gripped Marlow Creek for months. Lauren Kendrick was never found alive. Despite extensive searches and hope from the community, it became clear she had likely perished in the woods, a victim of the man who had inherited Mercer's dark obsession. The town mourned deeply, but also breathed a collective sigh of relief. The shadow that had haunted Marlow Creek was finally lifted, though scars remained. The case of Lauren and Jacob Kendrick became a chilling reminder of how darkness can creep unnoticed into even the quietest places, and how obsession, left unchecked, can destroy everything in its path. As the years passed, the cabin in the woods slowly rotted away, and the forest began to reclaim the land. The story of the Kendrick siblings became a whispered legend in Marlow Creek, a cautionary tale passed down to warn others of the dangers lurking in the shadows. But some nights, when the wind rustles through the trees and the forest grows quiet, residents say they still hear faint whispers carried on the breeze, reminders that some secrets never truly die.